Hey, look at me. We know who drives cars like this around here.
Excuse me? I'm just loading my groceries, man.
Don't play innocent. Keys in the fob, engine running. Where'd you steal it?
It is mine. Look, I'm leaving. Have a good evening.
You aren't going anywhere. I'm calling the cops right now.
You don't need my story, pal. You need to step back.
Parking lot security cameras captured what started as a routine grocery stop in a suburban parking lot escalate into a police response within minutes after a white couple accused a black man of stealing a luxury SUV that was legally his. The accusation triggered a 911 call, multiple officers on scene, and a confrontation that would later be reviewed frame by frame. What the couple and the responding officers didn't know at the time was that the man they were accusing had just been transferred into the city as its newly appointed chief of police. And by the end of the investigation, the officers involved and the racist couple would get what they deserved. The man's name was Marcus Thorne. He was 46 years old, recently moved to the city less than 6 weeks earlier, and had been sworn in as chief of police just days before this incident. That afternoon, none of that mattered to anyone around him. Thorne had finished shopping and pushed a cart toward a black luxury SUV parked near the front of the store. He was dressed casually, nothing that drew attention. He unlocked the vehicle, opened the rear door, and began loading grocery bags. That was when a white couple a few spaces away started watching him. At first, Thorne noticed it only because they weren't subtle. The woman stood with her phone in her hand, staring. The man leaned against their sedan, eyes fixed on Thorne, his expression tight. As Thorne placed another bag inside the SUV, the man took a few steps closer. "Hey," the man said. "What do you think you're doing?" Thorne turned confused. "Loading my groceries," he replied. The woman laughed sharp and dismissive. "That's not your car," she said. "I've been watching you." Thorne closed the door slowly. "It is my car." The man stepped closer, positioning himself between Thorne and the driver's door. "You don't look like the kind of person who owns something like this. Step away from the vehicle." Thorne paused. Around them, shoppers passed with carts, some slowing to watch. "I'm not stepping away from my own car," he said evenly. "If you have a problem, keep walking." Instead, the woman raised her phone. "I'm calling the police," she said. "We're not letting you steal this." Thorne exhaled and reached into his pocket again, pulling out his keys once more. He pressed the lock button. The SUV chirped. The mirrors folded in. "That doesn't mean anything," the man snapped. "Thieves do that all the time." The woman had already dialed. Thorne could hear her voice shift as the call connected. "Yes, hi, we're in the grocery store parking lot on Northwood Avenue. There's a black man trying to break into a luxury SUV. He's acting suspicious." Thorne looked directly at her. "That's a false report," he said. "You should stop." She turned away from him. "He's still here," she told the dispatcher. "He's refusing to leave the vehicle." Within minutes, a patrol car pulled in with lights flashing. Then another. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, hands already resting near their belts. The first was Officer Derek Vance, a 9-year veteran of the department. Vance had a history that wasn't visible on his uniform, multiple citizen complaints over the years. For escalation and attitude, most of them closed without discipline. He had been flagged once for poor judgment during a civilian stop, but remained on patrol. From the moment he arrived, he positioned himself directly in front of Thorne, feet planted hand hovering close to his belt. The second was Officer Caleb Hughes, 3 years on the force and still considered junior. Hughes had fewer complaints, but internal notes showed a pattern of unnecessary aggression and dismissive conduct during stops. He took a position slightly behind Thorne, eyes moving between Thorne and the SUV rather than the couple who made the call. "That's him," the man said, pointing. "He was trying to steal that SUV." The officers didn't ask Thorne anything at first. One nodded as the couple spoke, eyes locked on Thorne. The others circled behind him, glancing at the vehicle. Thorne stood still, hands visible. "Officers, that's my car. They're making a false accusation." One officer looked him up and down. "We'll figure that out," he said. "Where's your ID?" "It's in my wallet in my back pocket." "Don't reach for it yet," the officer said quickly. "Just tell me whose car this is." "It's mine. It's registered to me." The woman scoffed. "There's no way," she said. "Ask him how he paid for it." The officer didn't shut her down. Instead, he looked back at Thorne. "Sir, how did you come to own this vehicle?" Thorne stared at him. "That's not relevant. You can run the plates." The second officer leaned towards the first. "He's getting defensive," he said quietly. "Not quiet enough," Thorne said. "I'm not defensive. I'm standing in a parking lot being accused of a crime I didn't commit." A small crowd had formed. Phones were out now. Someone whispered, "What's going on?" The officer stepped closer. "Sir, I need you to step away from the vehicle while we investigate." I don't consent to any searches, and I haven't committed a crime. The officer's tone hardened. That's not a request. Thorne glanced around, taking in the eyes on him, the phone's recording, and the couple standing behind the officers with crossed arms. He kept his voice calm. I'll comply with lawful orders, but I want this documented. The officer moved in front of him, blocking the driver's door completely. Step away from the vehicle, the officer said, placing a light hand on Thorne's arm. Put your hands where we can see them. Vance's hand stayed on Marcus Thorne's arm longer than necessary. Hughes shifted closer, angling his body behind Thorne, close enough that Thorne could feel his presence without turning around. Hands where I can see them, Vance repeated. Thorne raised both hands slowly to chest level. They're visible, he said. I'm not resisting. Hughes glanced at Vance. See, he's already arguing. I'm not arguing, Thorne said. I'm complying. Vance ignored that. Why don't you just tell us the truth, he said. People don't usually get this nervous unless they're hiding something. I'm not nervous. I'm concerned. There's a difference. The woman stepped closer again, emboldened. He keeps talking back, she said. That's what guilty people do. Hughes nodded. That's what I'm seeing, too. Neither officer asked her to step away. Neither asked her to lower her voice. Instead, Vance turned back to Thorne. How much did this vehicle cost? That's none of your business, Thorne said. Vance's jaw tightened. Answer the question. I don't have to, Thorne replied. You can verify ownership through your system. Hughes scoffed. Must be nice walking around like rules don't apply to you. Thorne looked at him directly for the first time. Rules apply to everyone, he said, including you. That was enough for Vance to change his tone completely. All right, he said. Since you want to play games, step back now. Thorne took one step away from the SUV, still keeping his hands visible. Hughes immediately mirrored him, closing the distance again. You don't need to be that close, Thorne said. Hughes smirked. I'll stand wherever I want. Vance reached for his radio but didn't use it yet. Instead, he motioned toward the SUV. You don't mind if we take a look inside, do you? Yes, Thorne said immediately. I do mind. I don't consent to any searches. Hughes laughed under his breath. Of course you don't. A bystander spoke up from a few feet away. He said it's his car. Why don't you just run the plates? Vance turned his head sharply. This doesn't concern you, he snapped. Phones were clearly recording now. Thorne could see at least 3 pointed directly at him and the officers. The woman noticed too and lowered her voice, stepping slightly behind Vance again. Vance finally keyed his radio. Dispatch, run the plate, he said, reading it off. While they waited, Hughes continued talking. So where do you work? He asked Thorne. I don't need to answer that, Thorne said. Hughes shook his head. Figures. Dispatch came back a moment later. Plate returns to a Marcus Thorne. No wants or warrants. Vance didn't react the way Thorne expected. He didn't step back. He didn't apologize. Instead, he said, that just means the car is registered. Doesn't mean you weren't trying to steal it. That makes no sense, Thorne said. It's registered to me. Hughes chimed in. People borrow cars. People steal identities. Happens all the time. The woman nodded vigorously. Exactly. I knew it. Thorne took a slow breath. Am I being detained or am I free to go? Vance looked irritated. You're being investigated. For what crime? Thorne asked. Vance paused. Suspicious behavior. That's not a crime, Thorne said. Hughes leaned in closer. Careful, he said quietly. You're getting real close to making this worse for yourself. Thorne turned his head slightly enough to see Hughes out of the corner of his eye. Threatening me isn't going to help. Vance stepped forward again. That's it. Turn around. For what? Thorne asked. Turn around. A murmur rippled through the small crowd. Someone said, this is crazy. Another voice said he didn't do anything. Vance ignored them. Hands behind you. I'm not resisting, but I want a supervisor here. Hughes laughed openly this time. Everyone wants a supervisor when things don't go their way. I'm requesting one, Thorne said calmly. That's my right. Vance stared at him for a moment, then looked away. You don't get to make demands. I'm not making a demand. I'm making a request. Vance exhaled sharply and turned his back, slightly pressing the radio clipped to his shoulder. Dispatch, he said, irritation clear in his voice. Send a supervisor to Northwood parking lot. He released the button and looked back at Thorne, eyes hard. Don't move. Marcus Thorne stayed where he was, hands still, visible, shoulders squared. Hughes remained close behind him, just far enough to avoid touching him again, but close enough to signal control. The crowd had grown thicker now. A delivery truck idled nearby. A few people stood with phones held chest high, recording without trying to hide it. That was when the woman's husband stepped forward again. He hadn't said much since the officers arrived, but his body language had never relaxed. He stood beside the woman, now jaw-tight, arms stiff at his sides. As the minutes stretched on, his confidence returned. "This is taking too long," he said loudly, directing his voice at Vance. "If you ask me, he's just stalling. People like him always do." Vance didn't correct him. Instead, he nodded slightly as if the comment made sense. Hughes glanced over his shoulder at the man. "Sir, we're handling it," he said, but his tone wasn't dismissive. It was reassuring. The husband took that as permission. "I saw him walk up and start pulling on the door. Didn't even look around first. That's suspicious." Thorne turned his head slightly. "That's a lie," he said. "You watched me unlock it." The husband scoffed. "You expect us to believe that—" "Yes," Thorne said, "because it happened." The woman crossed her arms. "He's still being aggressive," she said. "Look at how he's talking." "I'm speaking calmly," Thorne replied. Hughes leaned toward Vance. "He keeps challenging everything," Vance responded without lowering his voice. "That tells me a lot." The husband stepped closer to the SUV, peering inside through the window. "You know what," he said. "If this really was his car, he wouldn't be acting like this." "That's not how ownership works," Thorne said. The husband turned toward him sharply. "Don't talk to me," he snapped. "You're already in enough trouble." Thorne looked at Vance. "Is he allowed to speak to me like that?" Vance didn't answer. Instead, he shifted his stance, placing himself slightly between Thorne and the husband, but not to protect Thorne. It was to control the scene. The supervisor's vehicle pulled in moments later. A marked SUV stopped near the edge of the lot. A taller officer stepped out, older than Vance and Hughes, scanning the scene before approaching. As he walked up, the husband immediately moved toward him. "Thank God," the husband said. "This guy tried to steal that car. He's been giving your officers a hard time." The supervisor raised a hand. "I'll get to you," he said, then turned to Vance. "What do we have?" Vance spoke first. "Suspicious male, possible attempted auto theft. Refusing to cooperate." Thorne looked at the supervisor. "That's not accurate," he said. "The car is registered to me. They called 911 and made a false report." The supervisor looked between them. "Sir, what's your name?" "Marcus Thorne," he said. The supervisor nodded. "ID? It's in my wallet back pocket." The supervisor glanced at Vance. Vance hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead," he said. Thorne retrieved his wallet slowly and handed over his ID. The supervisor looked down at it. His expression didn't change at first. Then he looked again more closely. He turned the card over, once then looked up at Thorne. "Sir," he said carefully, "how long have you been in this city?" "Just under 6 weeks," Thorne answered. The supervisor nodded again and keyed his radio, stepping a few feet away. He spoke quietly, but Thorne could still hear fragments. A name, a title, a confirmation request. The husband was still talking. "I don't care who he says he is," he said to Hughes. "People lie all the time. I know what I saw." Hughes nodded along. "That's what we're dealing with." The supervisor's radio crackled. He listened. His posture changed, not dramatically, but noticeably. His shoulders straightened. He looked back at Thorne, then at Vance, then at Hughes. He walked back into the group. "Officer Vance, Officer Hughes, step over here." They complied immediately. The husband frowned. "What's going on?" The supervisor ignored him and lowered his voice to the officers. "Do either of you know who this is?" Vance shook his head. Hughes shrugged. The supervisor took a breath. Then clearly and calmly, he said, "This is Chief Marcus Thorne." The words landed hard. Vance froze. Hughes's face went blank. The husband laughed once, short and dismissive. "That's not funny," he said. "You don't need to joke about this." The supervisor turned to him. "I'm not joking." The woman's face drained of color. "Wait, what?" Thorne spoke then for the first time since the supervisor arrived. His tone unchanged. "I was transferred here last month. This is my jurisdiction." Silence spread through the group. Vance swallowed. Hughes took a step back without realizing it. The husband shook his head. "No," he said. "No, that can't be right." The supervisor looked at Thorne again. "Sir, I apologize for the situation." Thorne nodded once. "There's nothing to discuss right now. Everything is recorded." He looked at Vance and Hughes. "I expect a full report, and I expect this incident to be reviewed." Vance opened his mouth, then closed it. The husband took a step forward. "So we're just supposed to believe him?" he demanded. "After everything—" Thorne looked at him calmly. "You made a false report. That will be addressed." The supervisor turned back to the officers. "Release him." Vance stepped away slowly. Hughes followed. Thorne adjusted his jacket, picked up his grocery bags, and paused before opening the SUV again. "We're not done here," he said quietly. Then he opened the door. Thorne pulled out of the parking lot without looking back. The SUV disappeared into traffic, groceries still in the back. The scene behind him unresolved. Vance and Hughes remained where they were. The supervisor watched the vehicle leave, then turned his attention to the officers. "Both of you," he said, "stand by your cars. Do not leave." Vance nodded quickly. Hughes didn't say anything. The couple was still there. The woman looked shaken now, her phone lowered. Her husband, on the other hand, was visibly irritated. "So that's it?" he asked. "You're just letting him go?" The supervisor faced him. "Sir, you made a report of a crime," he said. "That report is now in question." He was suspicious. Anyone would have thought so. The supervisor didn't respond to that. "I need both of you to stay here while I ask some follow-up questions." The husband crossed his arms. "This is ridiculous." Over the next 15 minutes, the supervisor separated them and took statements. The husband repeated his claim that Thorne had tried to force the door. The woman said she wasn't sure anymore, that she might have misunderstood what she saw. The two accounts didn't match. Meanwhile, Vance and Hughes stood near their patrol cars silent. Their body cameras were still recording. Before leaving the scene, the supervisor notified dispatch that a formal incident report would be filed and requested that the 911 call be preserved. He then instructed Vance and Hughes to return to the station, not to patrol. By that evening, the footage had already been flagged. The next morning, Internal Affairs opened a formal investigation. Vance and Hughes were placed on administrative leave pending review. Their weapons and badges were collected temporarily, standard procedure. Neither officer was given details beyond that. The review process moved quickly. Body camera footage showed Vance ignoring protocol from the start, failing to separate parties, escalating language without cause, and allowing the reporting couple to influence the interaction. Hughes's footage showed repeated dismissive remarks agreement with biased statements and encouragement of escalation rather than de-escalation. Audio from the 911 call was reviewed. The caller's language was documented. Key phrases were highlighted. Investigators noted that the description given did not match criminal behavior. Timeline analysis confirmed that Vance delayed running the license plate until after exerting control over Thorne. Training records showed both officers had completed bias and de-escalation training within the last 2 years. The findings were clear. Vance's personnel file was reviewed in full. Past complaints that had been closed without discipline were re-examined. Internal Affairs concluded that this incident followed an established pattern of behavior. Hughes's file showed fewer incidents, but the current footage demonstrated conduct unbecoming of an officer and a failure to uphold departmental standards. Within weeks, both officers were terminated. Vance was dismissed for policy violations, bias-driven enforcement, and failure to de-escalate. Hughes was dismissed for supporting discriminatory conduct and participating in an unlawful detention. Their union filed an appeal. The appeal was denied. As for the couple, the case was forwarded to the district attorney. They were charged with filing a false police report and disorderly conduct. Court dates were scheduled. Civil liability was still under review. The department released a public statement acknowledging the incident, confirming the terminations, and stating that the officers' actions did not reflect departmental values. The statement was brief and carefully worded. Behind closed doors, Thorne met with command staff. He did not raise his voice. He did not single anyone out. He reviewed the footage alongside them, pointing out specific moments where protocol failed and bias influenced decision-making. "At no point should this have escalated," he said. He acknowledged the obvious but uncomfortable reality. His position changed the outcome. His badge, unrevealed until the end, protected him in ways it would not have protected someone else. That's the issue. He said it shouldn't take a title for someone to be treated lawfully. He ordered a department-wide review of stop and detain procedures, additional training, and a re-examination of how prior complaints were handled. The incident was officially closed shortly after. For the department, it became a case study. For Vance and Hughes, it marked the end of their careers. For the couple, it resulted in legal consequences they hadn't expected when they made the call. And for everyone who watched the footage afterwards, it served as a reminder of how quickly an ordinary moment can escalate and how rarely accountability follows unless the evidence is impossible to ignore. This footage didn't just expose one incident. It exposed a mindset. If accountability matters to you, like, share and follow so these stories don't disappear.